back. Still doing practical faith. Now, moving in our next section of the book, and just kind of overall commentary of the world from a Christian perspective. And so let's look at something that we all spend the majority of our lives doing, which is work. And so, when we look at scripture, we must ask ourselves, like, is the way we living today the way God intended? And we're thinking practically, like, were we designed to get up 8, 12-hour work days, and that's how we're supposed to spend our lives? But Genesis doesn't sound like that. It says, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. And so, if the purpose of man is kind of like stewardship of the earth, then what is all this extra activity we doing? Because it doesn't contribute to those things. Reproducing, food, stewardship of the earth. That's not what we're doing with our time, okay? Now, we know that stewardship of this earth was an important thing to Yahweh Elohim, because we can see how Cain and Abel's work was evaluated in the offering. One brother took care of flocks, another brother took care of plants, which meant they were in some form of cultivating and subduing those things. One agriculturally gifted and one gifted with animals. Okay? And so, what do we see? Cain's offering is rejected really because, again, his attitude probably had to do with his work ethic, okay? And so, because we know as parents, when we ask a child to do a task, they do their chores, you know who's doing it in earnest and who is not. Cain and Abel likewise had responsibilities that they were looking over. One says, hey God, look at what I've done. He says, good. The other one says, hey God, look at what I've done. And he's like, this is a bad job. And you know it's a bad job. Okay. But so, we see part of this is a result of man's fall. And so, as I make later on in the book, man becomes corrupted, taking on death itself in his sin. He becomes like the thing that he consumed. So, now that work is painful, before you can eat of any things of the tree, it was good for you. Now you have to work to get the food. You're going to have to really put a little effort in. And so, if we don't work, we shouldn't eat. We know that from the Bible. People quote it all the time. But you must ask yourself, the way we live, most of us have enough food in our homes to last us weeks or months. And when I was in seminary, we had, guys had the doomsday prepper stuff where they had food stores that could last years. And most seminary students were poor. And they had stockpiles for years of food, so we're not working for food at this point. What are we working for? If we think about it practically, we're working for paper and rocks. They neither feed us nor reproduce. Plants, everything that God gave us, plants, animals, each other, all reproduces, all reciprocal. Paper and rocks are not. But yet, that's what we work for. But these things are not connected from like survival. It's not connected to our survival or meaning. Because it's like, again, our refrigerators are full. You know, we got deep freezers, second refrigerators in the garages, cabinets, and pantries full of food. There's food everywhere. Food banks everywhere. It's never a shortage of food. Even statistically, America hunger, people who don't have food is like 2%, which means 98% of America is fed. So what are we doing with our time? Because we have shelter. Also, we have enough air conditioned, millions of square feet of air conditioned space for storing our stuff. The stuff that we don't care enough to have in our homes. We pay to store it in air conditioned space. And there's millions of square feet of that, so we don't need shelter from the weather or any of those things. So what are we doing with our time? We give our years and we're building what? Nothing. And so, consider. You can go to work. If you do as normal, 50, 60 hours a week, your children go off to school and they're going to spend an equal amount of time away for you under the influence of someone else. And we must ask ourselves, what do we get in return? And what does this reproduce in our children? Now, what you're telling your children is that work is more important than anything else, even them. Because the numbers bear it out. You spend the majority of your time somewhere else. And that's because that's what's most important. That's the only way the kids interpret it, and they model the same behavior. And so we can see that this working doesn't help build a family or strengthen a family, but actually divides a family, okay? And so if we look at slavery from a practical sense, that's what we participate in currently. It's just been rebranded as progress, okay? In God's economy, remember, things are measured, his blessings are measured in things that reproduce perpetually, in perpetuity, okay? We'll spend our time on things that don't reproduce, businesses that were closed down, and producing things that essentially will be trash. And actually, our work is spent on things that are actually more harmful to us than is actually beneficial, making it wicked. And so, think about what Yahweh Elohim gives. Again, perpetuity, everything. It just keeps on going. There's never any lack unless we cause it. Okay? Now, instead, even things like money that we're working for, things that cannot grow, really is more of a tool that should be used to help free people from their predicaments. And that's the way it should work. And so, I don't know. The way we live, we need to think. People have fought and died for the right to be able to become employees. And we got to ask ourselves, are people to believe that freedom for mankind and equality and world peace come from labor? We must ask ourselves this. Now, what should you do? Because we do live in an economic system like this. We should think about work in a way that aligns with your personal goals and values for you, your practical life, and how you would like to live every single day. So you ask yourself, do I need more, or have I been trained to want more? Does my work build up others or exploit them? And is my work contributing to life, or is it consuming it? And so, God bless work for it sustains families, and there's things that you just practically you have to do. But if we're working for things outside of our necessities, food, shelter, clothing, it's like, what are we working for? And so, now, let's think about slavery as we see in the Bible, because it's all in Scripture. Again, but biblical slavery is not like American slavery or slavery that's chattel, okay? Slaves in biblical times could have great honor. Look at Joseph. Look at Abraham's servant Eliezer. They could marry, have property rights, and even in inheritance. Okay, and we see in the Bible where a person can even become a member of a household if he declares himself so as a slave. You can say, hey, I want to be with this person in this family, in this household for the rest of my life, and then they'll go put an earring in their ear, and they'll do that because they love where they're at. Imagine that, a slavery like that you want to have the opportunity to go live free. You say to yourself, I would rather stay where I'm at because I am happy here, and I am loved here. I will stay in servitude because I can't imagine a better life. I love what I do every day. That's how we bind ourselves to our jobs. That's how we talk about them. We love what we do. It is our passion, and we spend our time there. And yes, but at what real cost? And you say you love your children, which is the thing that the Lord has blessed you with, an opportunity to practically live forever, as each generation is just a reproduction of yourself. Why did not spend more time developing that, working on that, than working on, name whatever your special project is at your job that no one cares about? So, as we reflect, we need to think of how do we really think about work? Do we actually consider it like, do I want to spend my life here at this place, at this job? Is that what I want to be known for? Is my definition wrapped up in my job title? Does my job tell me that I need to sacrifice my family, which conflicts with my values? Do I have gratitude for the work that I do? And does my work cause harm to others? These are things that we should consider. Well.